Yes, so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us at Sunday Papers Live. I wanted to start by just kind of asking what your kind of personal journey was to founding this movement of getting offline and being unplugged for kind of both of you. What was the defining moment?
So for me, it was a build-up. I mean, it was a build-up over many, many years, but basically, after university, got a job at a startup, spent my early 20s working there. It was high-growth international expansion, flying around the world to set up these offices, so very exciting on the surface. But then I think inside, a lot of dissatisfaction, as I think is common at that point in life, and was just throwing myself into being busy. So whether it was going out, I had some issues with drinking, drug taking, all these things. Yeah, I have to say it. And just busy. And I think right at the center of that was my phone. And so I just started to develop just a bit of an aversion to it, but maybe didn't know what that was. And then all came to a head. In the summer of 2019, I ended up at a silent retreat in the Himalayas at the recommendation of a friend, which was this Buddhist temple on top of a mountain. And the best thing about that is when you get there, they take your phone off you, and you spend 10 days completely cut off from the outside world. So it was the first time I'd ever traveled by myself, spent a significant amount of time offline for the last decade or whatever. And it was incredibly liberating. And I came back from that, very cliche, quit my job a week later, and that was off the back of a conversation with a friend of mine. We used to work together, and he'd moved on. And he's not the kind of guy you'd find at a silent retreat anytime soon. We spoke about how there's a lot of stigma around retreats and meditation, and so much of the benefit is just getting people offline and into nature. And really, there's not anything out there to do that. You've got high-end retreats, you've got your yoga retreats, you've got Buddhist retreats, and then there's accommodation, lots of wonderful stuff out there already. But none of it actually gets you offline. People always say to us, why don't you just go to a hotel and put our phone in the drawer? And great, but you don't. Neither do I, and so really wanted to create something that made that possible.
You need some monks to take that phone and lock it away.
That's it.
Yeah,
we're those monks.
Interesting. So, do you have what was your journey? What's your personal journey?
Yeah, so my journey was a little bit different. So I graduated from university last year. Whilst I was at university, I was actually part of a startup, and our whole go-to-market was just marketing on TikTok. We grew really, really fast, like 0 to 700,000 followers in just a few months.
Can you work for us?
But as a result of that, I was spending maybe 10, 12 hours a day just watching TikToks, copying them, editing. It was pretty cursed. So coming out of graduating last year, I thought, I want to get off my phone more. But one of the downstream effects of us spending so much time on our phones is that we don't actually meet people in the real world anymore. So I wanted to combine that together, get people into the real world, get them talking and off their phones, and that's where we came with the Offline Club.
That's really interesting, because the question I've got written down here is 18 years since the iPhone, how has the world changed? That's an unbelievably enormous question. But the thing that's interesting about what you said, I was thinking, there's this generational thing as well, where sometimes I'm like a millennial, probably an older millennial, and people say, young people these days, they grew up with phones, they're stuck on them, it's so much worse for them. But do you think, you said you've just come out of university, you were in a moment when you were really on TikTok, you think there's a kind of generational thing where people who are of your age have more of a distance from it, or are able to to grow up with it, which has meant they have a more normalized relationship? I'm just wondering how your experience chimed with other people you were at university with.
Yeah, I mean, I very much just grew up with social media. From the age of 12, 13, I was on Instagram. But I think this is really an issue that goes across the age ranges. And to go back to your original point of 17 years or whatever since the iPhone, and how the world's changed. Now, I think it's changed for everyone. And I kind of want to demonstrate this to the audience now. So if anyone's got their phone on them, I'd love for you to go on your settings, check out your screen time. Just do it right now. If you're in the audience, get your phone out.
Here we are. This is like Screen Times Anonymous.
Yeah. Don't feel disgusted by it, because I'll explain why in a second.
Can you just tell us what you go on to again for some of the...
So if you go on to...
General.
Hang on, I've got it on my phone.
Maybe I'll just... Okay.
If you go on screen time, then settings.
I've got it.
Yeah, and then you should be able to see it. Now, I see someone shocked already, hand on their face. The average screen time in the UK is 8 hours a day, right? If you're only spending, say, 3 hours a day on your phone, that equates to 16 years across your lifetime that you'll be spending on your phone. Now, that's pretty shocking, but the one thing I'd say is don't feel disgusted by it. You know, big tech, we're at the mercy of big tech. They make their apps as addictive as possible. We as consumers, you know, struggle with that. But I think that's testament to how the last 17 years have changed. You know, we've gone from 0 hours screen time to people in the audience now with their hands on their faces in shock.
Exactly, and one of the things that we're kind of getting an idea of is that the momentum towards more screen time and the ability of tech companies to arrest and grab our attention is increasing rather than decreasing. So do we think screen time is going to kind of increase over the next few years as well? And like how, I know you guys are intentionally being a kind of countercurrent to that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's definitely a movement. Whenever new technology comes along, there's always this period of adjustment at the start. So for example, when cars came along, it took 35, 40 years for the seatbelt to come, right? So I think there's an element of everything has just been so wild in the last 15 to 20 years that as a society we're adjusting and figuring out what's next and what our relationship with screens should be going forward. There's also lots of noise around, you know, Sam Altman and Johnny Ive have just come out with a company. They want to wean people off screens. So their idea is to take everything that's happening on the screen and get that running in the background on AI and take it away. The flip side of that is there's something called Jevons paradox, which is, it comes from a book written in the 1850s by an economist called William Jevons. The book's called The Coal Question. And what he found is that this was during the Industrial Revolution. And he found that as we got better at, more efficient at processing coal, you would expect consumption to go down, but the opposite happens, consumption goes up. And it feels like a similar thing here, where, you know, for the last 100 years, we've been talking about the end of leisure, the end of work, and humans are suddenly going to just start working 10-hour weeks and just have leisure. But actually, the more happens on screens, if anything, it just makes us spend more time. And it's interesting because the biggest human pastime right now is watching content online, which is wild. So I think that is definitely the trend. That's where all the momentum is in society. But I think what we found, and we can talk about spending time offline, but what I found in my own life is the more time I spend offline, the more I crave time offline. And so I think there's a really interesting opportunity to start to send that momentum in another direction.
So the more you spend, that leads to a kind of change in habit and a change in consciousness, if I can put it so grandly.
Change of perspective, right? Because I think until you've actually spent, I mean, just out of interest, in the last decade, who spent multiple days offline in one go? Show of hands.
So it's less than half the room, or maybe
it's probably less than half the room, right? And that's quite wild because, you know, prior to 15, 20 years ago, we spent all our time offline. And to not have experienced that, so I think what's really interesting that happens when you go offline is you realize that, you know, the world doesn't end when you go offline. I think we have this narrative that I'm so big and important, and if I go off the internet for a few days, then planes are going to start falling out of the sky. And then you switch your phone on after a few days offline, nothing's happened. Your mum hasn't even checked in, right? So I think there's an interesting realization that happens. And the other thing is that you start to feel the benefits, because what happens when you go offline, it takes about a day for the mind to settle down, and then you start to get this deep sense of calm. And what's crazy is that's how humans are meant to operate. Like, we're not meant to walk around with this low-level anxiety that we have these days. And actually, that's just due to the overstimulation. Like, when we wake up, the first thing we do in the morning, check our phones, and the last thing at night. And there's a stat that it takes 15 minutes to regain your composure after you get distracted. For most of us, we're checking our phones, you know, we never go 15 minutes without checking our phones. So you basically spend the whole day in this state of distraction and overstimulation. And it's only when you take your phone away that you realize what you've missed. So experiencing that for yourself is a very powerful thing.
Wow, yeah, and you're kind of fighting this uphill battle against a huge amount of organized capital and talent from tech companies who are, obviously, it's a very deliberate decision to keep your attention arrested, keep you online. And in terms of resisting that and being able to kind of be present and be offline, what are the benefits that you've seen, and have you got any top tips for people about how to do it? We've had the recommendation of going to a Buddhist monastery.
Yeah, so the biggest benefit I notice is time just goes slower. In terms of like tips I'd recommend, there's two like really simple ones I think you can like throw into your everyday life. Number one, put your phone away in a different room before you go to bed, like half an hour before. You guys are probably well aware of like blue light before sleeping, but just being like less stimulated in that bedtime environment is massive. Number two, a bit of a novel one, you can wrap an elastic band around your phone. Now, a lot of the time, we get caught in like a scroll, right? We'll be scrolling on social media, scrolling. If you put an elastic band around your phone, your finger will hit it, right? So you'll get caught in the scroll. You'll have that prompt like, okay, I've just been scrolling mindlessly for 20 minutes. So buy an elastic band, wrap it around your phone.
And have you found it's kind of changed your relationships with other people, like people in the room that you're with, you have a kind of deepening of that relationship? Or I often think music festivals are great in their own right, but one thing that's often really good about them is you don't really have signal. And it means that people get such joy and kind of relief from making new friends with strangers, from someone that's just right in front of you rather than that constant chasing of your tail that we exist in. So yeah, has it changed any of the kind of relationships in your life or deepened them?
Yeah, I'm a lot more present. I would say is the number one thing. I don't have that distraction there on the table. A lot of the time, if you go to a restaurant now, for example, you'll see people with their phones down on the table, even if the screen's down on the table. I think this is a big problem and one we can all kind of combat, because it's like you're not giving your full appreciation and time to the person that's sat across from the table from you. So the biggest one for me is, just being more present.
Great. And so you guys have obviously founded the Offline Club Unplugged. You're kind of moving, trying to gain this momentum for people spending time offline. What would 2035 look like in your kind of rose-tinted glasses if we could get there?
I think the key thing is you have to affect change in this world, you have to make it sexy, ironically look good on social media, so kind of like Tesla does with
So there's a deep irony in that, yeah.
There is a deep irony, yeah, we do have to be good at social media. So I think for us it's really, can we normalize this? Can we make it cool and sexy and aspirational to go and spend 3 days offline in a cabin in our sense? And I think more and more is going to come out, and we want to be a driving force behind that, around just how good it is for us, because I think society is sick, let's be honest. There's the mental health, physical health of society really isn't in a great place, like we are not well. And I think a huge part of that, like the mind and body are very linked. So actually spending time offline allows the body to start to heal, and you're not going to solve all your problems going and spending 3 days offline in the cabin. But it does give you the space to start to realize what those problems are. So I think one of the things that really, really want to get into, because anecdotally, go and spend 3 days in the cabin, I do it a lot, as you can imagine, something pretty remarkable happens. And so I think to answer your question, we want to really try and quantify that, make it tangible, and just make it that someone, you go to the gym a few times a week for your physical health, you go stay in a cabin, or it doesn't have to be a cabin, you go spend a few days offline every 6 months as part of your mental health. And I just think that creates a kinder, more present society, as Ben said. I mean, to the point around empathy and relationships with people, just having your phone switched off on the table reduces the empathy between two people, and also reduces your performance in an IQ test. So the easiest hack you can do is just put your phone in a drawer, and it's going to improve your ability to connect with others. So I just think we're obviously going into a world where, everything is moving online, right? And hugely, behind everything happening in that space. But I think in that world, it's going to become even more of a superpower to be able to spend time offline. And so really it's just, can we get as many people as possible on board with that?
Yeah, we're going to need each other to do that, because we are, as you say, like on the frontiers of this awesome change, of the unlocking of AI and all the speculation around that. And obviously, we've just heard from Laura about the kind of trepidations and kind of many hazardous path that involves. You mentioned something about Sam Altman from OpenAI. Did you say he was founding something that was a kind of offline thing?
Yeah, he's basically teamed up with Johnny Ive, who designed the iPhone and the MacBook, and they are coming out with a device together, and it's basically going to be a pin or something that records everything that's happening and then just does all the work in the background. So think an AI assistant that does all the work that's happening. But what that doesn't do, it doesn't watch the TikTok videos for you. It doesn't spend hours scrolling through social media. So
Okay.
Let's see how that goes.
That sounds spooky. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or
Straight out
even
Black
more
Mirror.
dystopian. Yeah. But it does seem like we're on the frontiers of some really, really strange change. Any final thoughts, rallying calls that you'd like to ask before we go to a few questions or points you'd like to iterate?
No rallying calls. I think going back to like 2035, Hector put like a super optimistic view on it. I'd love to buy into that. But honestly, if we can get to 2035 and I'm sat on the tube and at least one person isn't hunched over like this, then I think that'll be quite a good 2035.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.